Hey guys, Detective Fail here, or Dia for short. Hope you're doing well. Back with another review, this time on Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition. Let's get started. You'll find the sea to be vast, deep, full of strength and energy, yet kind and gentle. Fisherman at the docks of Arni Village. Early on in my blind playthrough, I encountered an NPC who uttered those words to me, and as I sailed the calm seas and battled my way across countless biomes, the quote resonated in my mind again. Even as I landed the final blow on the final boss, I still felt it. Only when the end credits rolled around did I realize, if I were to replace the word sea with Chrono Cross, I feel the statement would still work. The game is vast, but not to the point of a barrel of filler content. Vast in the sense there is enough to explore off the beaten path to satisfy those who want to take a break in the story, but also enough to hold your satisfaction from the beginning, middle, and end of the narrative. Deep in the themes conjured both subtly in the NPC conversations and by important characters you meet. Evoking thoughtful, provoking questions as well as nuggets of lore. Occasionally you may find a clue to your next destination to progress the plot without being too complex to comprehend. Full of strength and energy permeates every inch of my playthrough. Environments are eye candy and have every color in the rainbow I could think of. Settings come alive from forests, beaches, caves, jungles, and more. Each monster is carefully designed to fit in their natural habitat, so you won't find a lava monster in the desert, or let's say a robot in an underwater cave. Heck, you won't even see dwarves or fairies in cities or towns. So much energy and confidence at work covering all aspects. For the music, I have to give props once again to Yasunori Mitsuda and more for gracing me with a beautiful soundtrack to my ears. This man does not miss. If I were to describe the whole soundtrack in as few words as possible, I would say upbeat, soulful, and perhaps mesmerizing, like I have been transported into the world of the tropical archipelago El Nido, and every track felt so pleasing to grace my ears. Especially one track I want to drop here, but best to experience it in-game since it feels almost magical to hear. But I'll give you guys a small taste to listen. Here it is. It's called Etude Part 1. Other tracks I love are Arni Village Home, and Termina Another. Which brought to mind powerful emotions to me. I could gush pages more, but I'll keep it short. I'll drop a link in the video description of a YouTuber who can describe it better than me on music, JRPGs, and emotions. The soundtrack in the Radical Dreamers Edition is also a refined one, and it's been a subject of confusion because of Square Enix's vague response. RPG side clarifies their statement with, here's the quote, "These tracks are not arrangements, but instead these are simply cleaned up versions of the original music with small adjustments to noise compression, equalization, and etc. This is the only soundtrack found when actually playing the game, and you cannot toggle it." End quote. So we have basically an original soundtrack we're going to hear, just refined a bit, Gameplay is a mix of standard JRPG, turn-based battles, and exploration, except you don't have any levels to grind for. A blessing since it eliminates the grind, so your party will naturally grow stat-wise as you defeat more enemies. The main bread and butter for combat are the elements. Each character comes equipped with them. Though you need to start filling up the slots by attacking enemies with melee, they must hit as well to count, no point in missing attacks. I recommend attacking foes with the first option during attacks. The second and third options have a lower chance to hit and therefore miss, wasting an action, so spamming the first option can quickly fill the elemental slots. You don't get a full tank of elements out the gate. Think of them like consumable spells. You can equip various spells onto each ally like healing, buffs, debuffs, attack, and attack all spells designated by 6 colored elements: red, green, blue, yellow, black, and white. As you win battles, you can slot more elements onto each party member. The caveat is each time you use one during combat, you cannot use them again, so no spamming willy-nilly. Players must carefully equip the right amount of elements to manage future battles while contending against enemies who can alter the field effect. Each time you or the enemy casts an element during a fight, a circle will change to correspond to the use of the spell. Let's use 3 fire attacks for example. The field effect transforms accordingly, and thus my attacks with fire become more stronger. So players should keep that in mind if a player constantly uses water attacks. Perhaps I should transmute the field or an opposite element to counter their strong attacks. You can see the indicator in the top left hand corner of the screen. Plenty of awesome quality of life features that make the remaster very appealing. Auto battle, fast speed mode, and slow speed mode are available. I don't see slow speed mode very often in other JRPG remaster or ports, but I have to admit the inclusion of it is useful. To admire animations or literally embrace a very slow playthrough. No random battles and battle boosts are also included. These are welcome additions. The former is self-explanatory, the latter gives your whole party invincibility, all enemy attacks miss, and you have filled elemental slots that will never deplete until you turn off the option. These enhancements are a godsend for quickly defeating enemy mobs, allowing players to move at a turbo pace. Ever so often I felt the natural speed of the game was slow, so the quality of life features greatly enhanced my experience, making the combat system faster and eliminating the process of actively avoiding enemies in your field of view, thereby not wasting your time and effort. In my case, I was able to finish the game quicker than I initially thought from the average on how long to beat, at just a little over 23 hours, completing a decent amount of side quests and recruiting a lot of characters too. In addition to exploring, you can enlist new party members throughout your journey, some of which are missable and non-missable. Reminds me heavily of the Suikoden series, except you don't have to recruit over 100 people. Instead, you have 45 possible units to join your merry band. It is important to note you cannot enlist everyone from the get-go. A few can only be gathered in New Game Plus playthrough or using the Continue Plus after you finish a playthrough with multiple save files. They can range from story ones you'll gain naturally as you progress the plot, and others are tucked away in side quests. More often than not, they're pretty straightforward to get them to join your crew, but others may take extra steps depending on the requirements. Revisiting them later on to give an important key item, defeating a monster, battling them, or helping with a small or large task. Usually if you see a unique portrait when speaking, most likely a new ally that can join you in the near or far future. Battles are fair and balanced. Enemies didn't feel absurdly difficult with outrageous health points, and even in the final act they were reasonably challenging, not to the extent I was battling against a sponge every chance I encountered an enemy, and as a result the narrative moved at a comfortable pace, since I could adjust the speed at my leisure. Item drops, shops, and upgrading my equipment felt painless and easy. Didn't feel the urge to meticulously arrange new elements for my new allies, since an option exists to autofill or auto-remove them. Speaking of which, the story starts with the player controlling Surge, Kid, and one random companion coming outside of an elevator in a large stone fort. Kid will remark about Lynx's Day of Reckoning, which sums it up best. Your group must defeat Lynx in the fort. Why, what, how? Questions don't matter for now. Once you finish your task at the fort, important events steadily rise, forming an interesting pace full of twists and sailing by turbulent storms and tides. Whether or not we succeed in defeating Lynx is a major device the plot cleverly hides until an opportune moment. Surely more is underneath the simple objective to kill one man, right? Well, yes, but to go further into detail on what happens is to delve deeper into spoilers. And this review is a non-spoiler one, so I'll move on. I'll talk about my mixed feelings about my experience with the remaster, not a positive or a negative, but for the sake of transparency, I'm noting them down. There is a point in the game where major revelations are told to the player, and quite frankly, a lot of Japanese role-playing games like to do this to varying degrees. Chrono Cross is weird in that respect, whereas their predecessor, Chrono Trigger, a title I played years ago and think fondly of, executes the revelations in a condensed and easily digestible form in such a way I feel majority of players understand, hence the reception. Here that also exists, although Masato Kato, the director and writer for Chrono Cross, tries to bite off more than he can chew, I feel. The executions of said revelations make the impact of a certain point a bit shaky, and as a result, it's not as strong as Chrono Trigger in that regard. Be that as it may, to play devil's advocate, I do applaud the bold move to tip the scales a tad, to make Chrono Cross rise above Chrono Trigger in ways. If we consider the topic of time travel in its entirety with all its aspects and subcategories can be a daunting task to link each thread. Other titles take a stab at the topic to varying degrees. Final Fantasy 13-2 delved into a pothole of time periods. Radiant Historia refined the aspect of producing a fresh product and palatable to newcomers. And while I haven't played 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim yet, trust me, I'll get around to it one day, the countless praise I've heard deserves a spot here for time travel stories worth looking into. So, in a way, Chrono Cross has some parts where it could have been gently fed, allowing the player to digest the revelations easily, perhaps less on lore dump, but further on the show don't tell method. As much as I've turned a 180 on the combat system long ago, I still have a small voice in my head saying it is possible newcomers will become confused, and I've consulted several friends of mine who had similar feelings. To this, I advise you to try it out and experience it first. If you're having trouble, do what I did and undertake the tutorial battle against the chief in Arnie Village, where you can start a demo of the combat mechanics. They explain all the terms, unique field effects, elemental usage, and attacks. And honestly, I feel he does a good job explaining things, and I can't help but wish I had a time machine to slap my old self silly for quitting early on, back when I tried the game many years ago. Anyway, besides the tutorial explanation, you can use the quality of life features to breeze fights and perhaps check out Before I Play on Chrono Cross in case you want to know extra tips and maybe a spoiler-free guide for a first playthrough. Some units' requirements to enlist them onto your party can be a bit vague on where to go or what to do. Perhaps a new location holds the key or clue to visit another location or converse with another NPC to progress further. I would scratch my head a bit and ponder my next course of action. Intermittently, I can take the loss and move on. The plot in the middle to final act shares this dilemma as well. I only had to consult a walkthrough once since I became lost on where to go, but for the most part, important story characters will lead you in the right direction. Just try to remember what your next objective is. You may have an easier time than I did. Usually story units rather than optional members receive more spotlight in their backstory, relationships, and lore, and while I can understand this, I wish it was the same across the board. On the other hand, I did experience quite a decent chunk of noteworthy side quests which delve deep into a couple of characters. Could be your mileage might vary type of deal. Granted, if I were to play devil's advocate once again, the added backstory, relationships, and quality side quests would inflate the game's hours more. Maybe it's not a good idea to have every side character fleshed out. But the potential. Undoubtedly, the question of whether or not you need to play Chrono Trigger will spring up. Maybe. Chrono Cross plays safely enough without the knowledge of Chrono Trigger. Hell, Masato Kato directly states it. I'll drop a link down in the video description so you can get the source, but here he even says so. However, playing the first entry rewards players with important lore from their predecessor, constructing a sort of foundation for players to settle upon and see once they play Chrono Cross, providing context as to how and why the events that occur, and perhaps enhance their experience. So I'm on both sides if you played Chrono Trigger or not before playing Chrono Cross. Like their predecessor, there are multiple endings here, so if you were unable to earn the true ending in the first go, you can see it via YouTube, so don't worry if the ending you obtained felt meh. I didn't see it in my blind first playthrough, so I searched for the true ending online. Literally 10 times better than the garbage ending I got. I facepalmed so hard once I saw the requirements to achieve it. That's it for my mixed feelings. Quite frankly, I mainly had a lot of upsides and hardly any downsides when playing. I didn't have any crashes on my Switch version, no serious or minor bugs either. I did come across the cursor rarely taking me out of engagements by accidentally pressing the runaway option. Nonetheless, I was able to restart the battle swiftly without much progress lost. The remaster performs as expected without any notable issues. The last update to the game improved the FPS and bug fixes, so I think I can safely say the Radical Dreamers Edition is a safe recommendation to start your playthrough versus the old version. Even comes equipped with the never before released outside Japan until now, translated to an English visual novel called Radical Dreamers. A short side story to Chrono Trigger and precursor to Chrono Cross took me less than 3 hours to complete, and while labeled as non-canon, I greatly appreciate the extra backstory and moments shared between Surge, Kid, and Mago. Though I didn't like the random encounters during some sections, seemed too forced to make it a bit of a struggle to fight against despite the troublesome encounters. I like the music and the decisions you make though. I also think it's a nice way for Chrono fans who want to experience it before or after playing the game, since the remaster added a new hidden post-credit scene, only activating once you finish both games and hit the credits option in the menu. The scene left me in a state of bewilderment and excitement, and as much as I want to delve more into that, it's time to end this review, since it's getting too long. My final score is a 9.5 out of 10. Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers Edition, is one of the finest Japanese role-playing games I've had the pleasure of playing. Masato Kato and his team have accomplished the impossible by bringing back a skeptical one who thought they could not top Chrono Trigger, yet it does so in several ways. The mix of recruiting allies as you progress the narrative is a fascinating take from the Suikoden formula, and my journey was filled with laughter and seriousness to top it all. Succeeds in balancing an enjoyable gameplay mix of exploring, recruiting, and battling in aesthetically pleasing environments accompanied by a refined soundtrack from Mitsuda. And filled to the barrel of charm, wit, and a likable cast. Worthwhile side quests with plenty of optional content to fill your belly. A vibrant visual style makes full use of the color palette, enriching every dungeon, town, overworld, creature, and the main cast. While the plot can make or break it for some, it holds steady in the sea due to the elements above holding the boat up high. So give it a shot and don't you be afraid of starting. A must play for any JRPG fan or newcomer to the genre. For those curious, the fisherman that I said earlier regarding the quote did have some more lines to say, which I find fascinating in contrast to what he said initially. So I'll leave you guys with his last lines. But once it becomes angry, it can turn into the most frightening monster you've ever seen, engulfing everything. Close your eyes and prick up your ears. Can you hear the cries of countless men swallowed by the sea? The hidden secret the sea whispers. I recommend you learn to sense the mood of the sea. That's if you don't want to join the fellows already on the bottom. Fisherman at the docks of Arnie Village. Thank you guys for listening and watching, and take care.